The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated in space, a station the size of a small moon, and inside it sat representatives from 12,000 different civilizations. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color based on the mood of the speakers. Right now, they glowed a calm blue. That would not last. Daniel Perry walked slowly to the human podium. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Concord for 22 years. In that time, he had watched humanity ask for the same things over and over again, and he had watched them get rejected over and over again. Today would be different. The High Speaker stood at the center of the chamber. His name was, and he was a being made entirely of living crystal, 12 feet tall and glowing with inner light. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They never let anyone forget this. Had just finished a long speech. He had explained in great detail why humanity's request for expansion into the outer rim would be. This was the 47th time humans had made this request. This was the 47th time it had been rejected. The reasons were always the same. Humans bred too fast. Humans used too many resources. Humans were too aggressive. Humans were too emotional. Humans were too young as a species. They needed another 10,000 years to mature before they could be trusted with empty space. Daniel had heard these words so many times that he could recite them from memory. He stood at his podium and looked around the chamber. 12,000 species. Most of them had never spoken to a human. Most of them had voted against humanity based on nothing but rumors and fear. He thought about his granddaughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old. She had asked him once why the aliens did not like humans. He had not known what to tell her. Now he knew exactly what to say. "Thank you, High Speaker," Daniel said. His voice was calm. The translation systems carried his words to every being in the chamber. "Thank you for explaining, once again, why humanity is not worthy of the same opportunities given to other species." The crystals in the walls flickered slightly. Some of the delegates shifted in their seats. "For 300 years," Daniel continued, "humanity has been a member of this Concord. For 300 years we have followed your rules. We have limited our population growth. We have restricted our expansion. We have shared our technology, our medicine, our art. We have sent our soldiers to die in your wars. We have done everything you asked." He paused. The chamber was completely silent. "And for 300 years you have treated us like children. You have us seats on the High Council. You have blocked our colonies. You have placed limits on our ships and our weapons. You have told us, again and again, that we are too primitive to be trusted." Made a sound that the translator rendered as polite disagreement. "Ambassador Perry, the Concord has always acted in the best interests of all species. Humanity is young. In time, your people will earn greater responsibilities." "In time," Daniel repeated. He almost smiled. "High Speaker, do you know what humans have learned in 300 years of dealing with the Concord?" They did not respond. "We have learned that time means nothing to you. They live for 10,000 years. To you, 3 centuries is a brief moment. But humans live for 1 century if we are lucky. Generations of my people have been born, lived their entire lives, and died while waiting for the Concord to treat us with respect." Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. It was a simple data chip. He placed it on his podium. "This is the official declaration of the United Earth Confederation," he said. "Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Concord. We renounce all treaties, all agreements, and all obligations." The chamber erupted. The calm blue of the walls turned to angry red. Voices shouted in 100 different languages. Delegates jumped to their feet. Daniel waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke again, his voice was still calm. "We will be leaving this galaxy within the next 10 years. We have developed technology for intergalactic travel. Our destination is the Andromeda Galaxy, approximately 2.5 million light-years from here. We will build our civilization there, far from the conquered and its endless rules. Stepped forward. This is madness. Intergalactic travel is impossible. No species has ever achieved such a thing. No species ever had a reason to try, Daniel said. You made sure we had a reason. He picked up the data chip and walked toward the exit. Security forces from a dozen species moved to block his path, but waved them away. The high speaker was too shocked to act. You cannot leave, called out. The galaxy needs humanity. Daniel stopped. He turned to look at For a moment, something like anger crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. The galaxy has spent 300 years telling us we are not needed, he said. We have decided to believe you. He walked out of the chamber. Within 1 hour, every government in the galaxy received the same message. Humanity was leaving. The exodus would begin in 10 years. Any being who wished to join them was welcome to apply. All human personnel would be withdrawn from galactic positions within the next 12 months. The message ended with a single line that would be remembered for centuries. You wanted a galaxy without humans. Now you will have one. On Earth, the news spread fast. In cities across the planet, people gathered to watch the announcement. There was fear at first. Leaving the galaxy seemed impossible, terrifying, insane. But then the fear turned to something else. For the first time in 300 years, humanity would be free. No more rules made by species who despised them. No more begging for permission to grow. No more being treated like children. In the streets of New York and Tokyo and Lagos and Mumbai, people began to cheer. Daniel Perry watched the celebrations from the window of his transport ship. He thought about all the years he had spent trying to make peace with the conquered. All the compromises, all the humiliations, all the failed negotiations. It was over now. They were finally going home. His communicator buzzed with incoming messages. They wanted to talk. They wanted to talk. They were making threats. Everyone wanted something from humanity now that humanity was leaving. Daniel turned off his communicator and closed his eyes. Let them panic, he thought. Let them see what a galaxy without humans looks like. They would learn soon enough. Commander Lisa Warren stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge and watched the chaos unfold across a dozen screens. Every screen showed a different part of the galaxy falling apart. It had been 3 months since humanity announced their departure, and the cracks were already showing. She was 41 years old, with short brown hair and the kind of face that never showed surprise. After 15 years in the Earth fleet, she had seen too much to be surprised by anything, but even she had not expected things to fall apart this quickly. Report, she said to her communications officer. Was young, only 26, but he was one of the best in the fleet. He pulled up the latest data on his screen. The trade union has lost control of 17 shipping routes. They are demanding emergency meetings with Earth government. The collective is mobilizing their fleet. Lisa nodded slowly, and the agricultural worlds hesitated. IV declared a food emergency this morning. Station has 2 months of supplies left. The Helix colonies are already rationing. All because we're leaving. All because we're leaving, agreed. Lisa walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the first of the great Exodus ships were being built. Massive vessels, each one capable of carrying millions of humans across the void between galaxies. It was the largest construction project in human history. And everywhere else, the galaxy was learning a terrible lesson. For 300 years, humanity had quietly made themselves essential. Human engineers had designed the jump gates that connected the galaxy. Human doctors had created cures for diseases that had killed billions. Human farmers had developed techniques that could make dead worlds bloom. Human soldiers had fought and died to keep the peace. The conquered had never noticed. They were too busy looking down on the primitive humans to see how much they depended on them. Now they were beginning to understand. On the agricultural world of IV, there were a peaceful species that resembled tall, thin insects. They had been farming for 10,000 years, but their own soil was toxic to most food crops, so 3 centuries ago, they had invited human agricultural specialists to help them. The humans had worked miracles. They had modified the soil, introduced new crops, and built irrigation systems that turned the entire planet into a garden. IV had become one of the most productive farming worlds in the sector. Now the humans were packing up their equipment and leaving. Farmer Prime Tao watched them go with growing horror. He was the leader of the Agricultural Council, and he had spent the last 2 months begging the humans to stay. "Please," he said to the human team leader, a woman named Grace, "you cannot leave us. Without your systems, our crops will die, our people will starve." Grace was packing her tools into a metal case. She did not look up. "We offered to teach your engineers how to maintain the systems. Your government said that should not learn from primitives." "That was a mistake, we know that now." "You knew it then too," Grace said. She finally looked at him. There was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion. "Every year we asked to train local workers. Every year you refused. You wanted our help, but you did not want to admit you needed it. We were proud, we were foolish." "Yes," Grace agreed, "you were." She sealed the case and walked toward the waiting transport ship. Behind her, the vast green fields of IV stretched to the horizon. In 2 growing seasons, they would be brown and dead. Meanwhile, in the shipyards of Prime, the situation was even worse. There were a small, furred species known throughout the galaxy for their business skills. They ran the largest shipyards in the sector, building and repairing vessels for hundreds of species. Their economy depended on these shipyards. But the heart of every ship they built was a human fusion core. Human engineers had developed these cores a century ago. They were more powerful, more efficient, and more reliable than anything else in the galaxy. The humans had shared this technology freely, asking only that they be allowed to help maintain it. Now the humans were leaving, and they were taking the knowledge with them. Shipmaster stood in the central yard and watched the last human engineers board their transport. All around him, half-finished ships sat silent and dead. Without humans to install and calibrate the fusion cores, they were nothing but metal shells. "This is illegal," shouted at the departing humans. "You cannot take proprietary technology from space." The lead engineer, a man named Santos, paused at the transport door. "We are not taking anything. We are simply leaving. If you want to know how to build fusion cores, you should have let us teach you." "We did not need your teaching. We only needed your labor." Laughed, it was not a happy sound. "And that, shipmaster, is why you are going to have a very difficult decade." The transport lifted off, leaving alone in his dying shipyard. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, emergency sessions were being held every day. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly desperate to cooperate. The problem was that none of them knew how to solve the crisis. The High Speaker had sent 17 requests for meetings with Earth's government. All of them had been politely declined. "They will not even talk to us," he told the Emergency Council. "We cannot negotiate if they refuse to negotiate." "Then we must force them to negotiate," said General of the Collective. There were large, reptilian beings with a warrior culture. They believed that every problem could be solved with enough firepower. "We have the largest fleet in the sector. We can blockade their departure." "That would be unwise," said Ambassador of the Trade Union. "The humans have been part of our peacekeeping forces for generations. They know our tactics, our weapons, our weaknesses. A war with humanity would be costly." "We are," said proudly. "We do not fear costly wars." 2 weeks later, The fleet moved to blockade Earth's main Exodus shipyard. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Lisa Warren watched them come. 47 warships, the pride of their collective, armed with the best weapons in the galaxy. She was not worried. "Commander," said, "the flagship is hailing us. They demand we surrender the shipyard and halt all Exodus preparations." Lisa sat down in her command chair. "Open a channel." General appeared on the screen. He was massive, covered in green scales with eyes like burning coals. "Human commander, you are surrounded. Surrender now or be destroyed." Lisa smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "General, I have a question for you. Do you know why humanity has always been willing to share our weapons technology with the conquered?" Snorted, "Because you are weak. You needed our protection." "No," Lisa said. "Because what we shared was our second-best technology. We always kept the best for ourselves." She nodded too. Across the human fleet, weapons systems that had never been revealed came online. Energy signatures that the sensors could not identify. Targeting systems that locked onto every enemy ship simultaneously. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw," Lisa said. "After that, I will demonstrate what human weapons can really do." Hesitated. For the first time in his life, he was uncertain. Then his tactical officer screamed something in language. On the screens, Lisa watched as the fleet turned and fled. The blockade was over in 11 minutes. Not a single shot was fired. Later looked at Lisa with something like awe. "Would you really have destroyed them?" Lisa did not answer for a long moment. "The galaxy spent 300 years treating us like harmless pets," she finally said. "They are going to learn that humans are anything but harmless." She turned back to the viewport, where the Exodus ships were taking shape against the stars. "Let them panic," she said quietly. "We have a new home to build." The human embassy on 7 Station had been the busiest place in the sector for 2 centuries. Diplomats from hundreds of species had walked through its doors, seeking trade agreements, medical assistance, and technological partnerships. The walls were decorated with gifts from grateful worlds, and the halls were always full of activity. Now the halls were empty. The gifts had been packed into crates. The staff had been reduced to a skeleton crew of 5 people, and their only job was to close everything down. Mitchell was the youngest of them. He was 24 years old, fresh out of the diplomatic academy, and he had been left behind for one simple reason. He was too young and too unimportant to be needed on the Exodus ships, but he was smart enough to handle the final paperwork. He was also young enough to not care about being polite to species that had spent 3 centuries insulting his people. When the delegation arrived, was packing books into a box. The delegation was large, over 300 beings representing different species. Leading them was himself, the High Speaker, the most powerful being in the Galactic Concord. Put down the book he was holding and walked to the entrance. He looked up at the towering crystalline figure and smiled politely. "High Speaker, welcome to the embassy. I apologize for the mess. We are closing down." His crystal body flickered with impatience. "I must speak with Ambassador Perry. This situation has become critical." "Ambassador Perry is on an Exodus ship, sir. He left 2 weeks ago." "Then whoever is in charge. I must speak with someone of authority." Looked around the empty embassy. "That would be me, sir." The delegation stared at him. A human child, barely more than a juvenile by their standards, was the highest-ranking human left in the sector. It was almost insulting. But they had no choice. "Very well," said. "I must discuss the terms of humanity's continued presence in the galaxy." Led them to the main conference room. Most of the furniture had already been removed, so the delegates had to stand. Sat on a packing crate and looked at them with calm interest. "I am afraid there are no terms to discuss," he said. "Humanity is leaving. That decision has been made." "The decision must be reversed," said Merchant Prime of the Trade Union. She was small and covered in golden fur, and her voice was sharp with desperation. Your departure will cause economic collapse across the galaxy. Trillions of beings will suffer. I understand, said. Then you must help us prevent it. Tilted his head, why? The question hung in the air, made a sound of frustration. Because it is the right thing to do, because suffering should be prevented when possible. That is interesting, said. He picked up a data pad from the crate beside him and scrolled through it. I have been reading the records of humanity's time in the Concord. 300 years of history. Would you like to hear some of it? No one responded, so he continued. In the year 2157, humanity requested permission to send medical teams to the border worlds. A plague was killing millions. The Concord the request because humans were not qualified to treat alien diseases. By the time the Concord sent its own teams, 30 million had died. He scrolled to another entry. In the year 2203, humanity offered to share our agricultural technology with the free of charge. The Concord blocked the offer because it would give humans too much influence in the sector. They had to pay the full price for the same technology, which took them 40 years to afford. He looked up at, they made a large profit from that deal, I believe. Said nothing. In the year 2251, humanity requested permission to expand our colonies into the outer rim. We were told that humans bred too quickly and would consume too many resources. That same year, they expanded their own territory by 12 star systems, despite having a population growth rate higher than ours. His crystal form flickered. Those decisions were made by previous councils. I cannot answer for them. Of course not, said. No one can ever answer for anything. It is always the previous council, the previous administration, the previous generation. No one is ever responsible. He put down the data pad. You ask us to stay because trillions will suffer, but trillions have already suffered because of how the Conquered treated humanity. Our doctors could have saved millions of lives, but you did not trust us. Our farmers could have fed entire worlds, but you did not want our help. Our engineers could have built wonders, but you saw us as primitives. We were wrong, said. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. We admit this now. We were wrong about humanity. Yes, agreed, you were. He stood up from the crate and walked to the window. Outside, the stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere out there, the Exodus ships were being loaded with everything humanity had ever built. The problem, said, is that you only admit you were wrong because you need something from us. If we were not leaving, you would still be treating us the same way. You would still be denying our requests, blocking our expansion, calling us primitives. Nothing would have changed. He turned to face the delegation. We do not trust you. We do not believe that things will be different. And frankly, after 300 years of being treated like children, we have decided that your problems are no longer our problems. A being from the back of the delegation stepped forward. It was a helix, a species that resembled floating jellyfish. Its translator spoke in a gentle, musical voice. What about those of us who tried to help humanity? Not all species voted against you. Not all of us treated you poorly. His expression softened slightly. I know, and I am sorry that you will suffer because of the decisions made by others, but we cannot save everyone. We can only save ourselves. What would it take? The helix asked. What would humanity need to stay? Thought about it for a long moment. Nothing, he finally said. There is nothing you can offer us. You had 300 years to offer us respect, equality, and partnership. You chose not to. Now we have found something better. What is better than the galaxy? Asked. Freedom, said simply. A place where we can grow without asking permission. A place where our children will not be told they are too primitive to matter. A place where we can build something of our own. He walked toward the door of the conference room. The embassy will be closed in 3 days. After that, there will be no human presence in this sector. I suggest you use the time to figure out how to survive without us." Called after him, "You are condemning us to destruction." Paused at the door. "No," he said quietly. "You condemned yourselves. We are simply leaving you to face the consequences." He walked out, leaving 300 desperate beings standing in an empty room. Later that night, sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. His communicator buzzed with dozens of messages from different species, all begging for help, all offering deals that should have been made centuries ago. He ignored them all. In 3 days, he would board a transport to Earth. From there, he would join the exodus to Andromeda. He would never see this galaxy again. He thought about the delegates he had spoken to today. Some of them had seemed genuinely sorry. Some of them had truly wanted to make things right. But it was too late. The decision had been made and there was no going back. Closed his eyes and tried to imagine what Andromeda would look like. A new galaxy, untouched by the politics of the conquered. A place where humanity could finally be free. It was worth everything they were leaving behind. He fell asleep dreaming of new stars. The emergency session of the Galactic Concord was the largest gathering in its history. Representatives from every member species had been summoned, over 12,000 civilizations packed into the Great Chamber. The walls glowed an angry red that had not faded in weeks. Dr. Cole stood at the human podium and looked out at the assembled beings. She was 52 years old, with silver hair and steady hands. For 30 years, she had been one of Earth's leading scientists. For the past 7 years, she had been keeping a secret that would change everything. Today she would reveal it. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she began. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "I know many of you are angry at humanity. You believe we are leaving out of wounded pride or petty revenge. You think this is about the centuries of insults and discrimination." She paused. "You are wrong." Leaned forward in his seat. "Then explain, Dr. Cole, why is humanity truly leaving?" Activated a holographic display. The Milky Way galaxy appeared above the assembly, a beautiful spiral of stars. 15,000 years from now, give or take a few centuries, something will wake up. Something that has been sleeping since before any of your civilizations existed. Something called the... Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A few delegates made sounds that translated as nervous laughter. "They are a myth," said General of the... "a story to scare children. There is no evidence they ever existed." "There is evidence," said. "We found it 7 years ago." She changed the display. Now it showed a region of space near the galactic core, an area that most species avoided because of the intense radiation. A human exploration vessel discovered this site 400 light-years from the core. What they found was the remains of an advanced scout ship. It had been there for approximately 50 million years. The display showed images of the wreckage. It was massive, larger than a small moon, and its construction was unlike anything known to galactic science. The metal was black and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "We spent 3 years studying the wreckage," continued. "We decoded fragments of their data banks. What we learned was terrifying." She looked around the chamber. Every being was watching her now, and the nervous laughter had stopped. "They are not a myth. They are a species that exists in cycles. They wake, they consume, and then they sleep. When they wake, they spread across galaxies like a plague, destroying everything in their path. They have consumed at least 3 galaxies that we know of, perhaps more." "How long until they wake?" asked Ambassador of the... "Our best estimate is 15,000 years, perhaps less." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species were shouting in fear. Others were demanding proof. The general was insisting that any threat could be defeated with sufficient military force. Waited for the chaos to die down. 7 years ago," she said, "we brought this evidence to the Galactic Concord. We requested an emergency session. We asked for a joint defense initiative to prepare for the awakening. She looked directly at, "Do you remember what happened, High Speaker?" This crystal form flickered, "I remember." "Then tell them." Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. The council dismissed the evidence. We believed it was a human fabrication designed to increase their influence in the conquered. "You called us hysterical," said. "You said we were seeing threats where none existed. You said it was typical human behavior, overreacting to everything. You voted to classify our report and prohibit further discussion." "We made a mistake." "You made a choice," corrected. "You chose not to believe us because you did not respect us. You assumed that primitives like us could not possibly discover something that the great civilizations of the conquered had missed." She turned back to the assembly. "So we made our own choice. We decided to leave. We spent the last 7 years developing intergalactic travel, building Exodus ships, and preparing to start over in Andromeda." "But why leave?" asked the Helix delegate. "If the threat is real, why not stay and fight together?" Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because you did not believe us. Because you never believe us. Because when the wake in 15,000 years, you will still be arguing about whether they are real while they consume your worlds." She walked away from the podium and stood at the edge of the speaker's platform. "In Andromeda, we will have time to prepare. We will build defenses. We will develop weapons. When they come for us, and they will come eventually, we will be ready." "What about us?" asked. "That is your problem to solve. We gave you the information 7 years ago. You chose to ignore it. Now you will face the consequences of that choice." General stood up. His scales were flushed dark with anger. "This is cowardice. You would abandon the galaxy to save yourselves." "Cowardice?" Turned to face him. "We offered to help you. We offered to share our technology, our research, our plans. We offered to work together as equals. You said no. You said humans could not be trusted with such important matters." She walked toward the general. He was twice her size, armed with natural weapons that could kill a human with a single blow. She did not seem afraid. "For 300 years you have treated us as inferiors. Now you call us cowards for refusing to die for species that despise us. That is not cowardice, General. That is self-respect." She turned back to the assembly one last time. "Any individual being or species who wishes to join the Exodus is welcome. The ships leave in 8 months. After that, you will be on your own. I suggest you start preparing." She walked out of the chamber without looking back. The session continued for hours after she left. Species blamed each other for the failure to take humanity seriously. The demanded military action. The demanded economic solutions. The demanded more time to study the evidence. No one agreed on anything. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity was leaving because they had discovered a threat that no one else believed in. They were running to save themselves while the rest of the galaxy argued about whether the danger was real. Some species were furious. They called humanity traitors and cowards. But others began to look more carefully at the evidence. They sent their own ships to the galactic core. They studied the fragments of data that humanity had released to the public. And slowly, one by one, they began to realize that the humans had been telling the truth. On the agricultural world of IV, Farmer Prime Tal looked up at the stars and thought about what he had heard. They were coming. Maybe not for 15,000 years, but they were coming. His crops were dying, his people were starving, the galaxy was falling apart. He made a decision. The next day, he applied to join the human exodus. He was the first non-human to do so. He would not be the last. 8 months had passed since the announcement. 8 months of chaos, desperation, and preparation. Now the day had finally arrived. Admiral Cole stood on the observation deck of the Spirit of Tomorrow, the largest ship ever built by human hands. It was 5 miles long and carried 2 million people, along with everything they would need to start a new civilization. Behind it, stretching across the darkness of space, were 300 more ships of various sizes. Together, they carried the future of humanity. Was 67 years old, with a white beard and eyes that had seen too much. He had spent his entire career in the Earth fleet, defending humanity's interests in a galaxy that did not want them. Now he would lead his people to a new home. His daughter joined him at the viewport. She looked tired but satisfied. Her work was done. She had told the truth, and now they were leaving. "How many are we carrying?" asked. 3 billion humans, replied, plus 42 million non-humans who applied to join us. Raised an eyebrow. 42 million, that is more than I expected. Most are farmers and traders who worked with humans for years. Some are scientists who believed our warnings from the beginning. A few are soldiers who were disgusted by their government's response to the crisis. What about the Helix? Smiled. Almost their entire population. They said humanity was the only species that ever treated them as equals. They would rather face the unknown with us than stay in a galaxy that ignored them. Nodded slowly. It was strange, he thought. For 300 years, humans had been told they were alone, that no other species truly respected them. Now, at the end, they were learning that they had friends they never knew about. The observation deck door opened, and a young man entered. It was Mitchell, the junior diplomat who had faced down the entire delegation at 7. He had been promoted since then. Apparently, telling the High Speaker to solve his own problems was considered a sign of excellent diplomatic instincts. "Admiral, the fleet reports ready for departure," said. "Good, and the communications?" "Still coming in. Hundreds of messages every minute. Pleas for help, offers of alliance, threats of retaliation." Walked to the communications panel and looked at the stream of incoming signals. Species that had never spoken to humanity were now begging for their assistance. Species that had voted against them for centuries were offering anything, everything, if only the humans would stay. "They still do not understand," he said quietly. "Understand what?" asked. "That it is not about what they can offer us. It is about what they took from us. 300 years of dignity. 300 years of being treated like we did not matter. No apology can give that back." He reached for the panel, then hesitated. There was one message blinking at the top of the queue, marked as priority. It was from. Opened it. The High Speaker appeared on the screen. His crystal form was dim, almost gray, as if the light inside him was fading. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Admiral Cole, I know you will probably not respond to this. I know we have no right to ask anything of you. But I am asking anyway, not as the High Speaker, but as an individual who has made terrible mistakes." Paused, his form flickered. "I have studied your history since humanity announced its departure. I have read about your struggles on Earth, your wars, your suffering. I have seen how you overcame everything that should have destroyed you, and I have realized something that shames me deeply." The looked directly at the camera. Humanity was never primitive. You were never inferior. You were simply different, and we were too arrogant to see your worth. We judged you by our standards and found you lacking when we should have learned from your strengths. He bowed his crystalline head. "I cannot undo 300 years of injustice. I cannot give you back what we took. All I can do is apologize and wish you well in your journey. May you find in Andromeda the peace and respect that we failed to give you." The message ended. Stood motionless for a long moment, behind him, and waited in silence. Finally spoke. "Log that message. Archive it for future generations. Let them know that in the end, at least one of them understood." He turned back to the viewport. Ahead, the darkness between galaxies stretched out like an endless ocean. Behind, the Milky Way glowed with the light of 400 billion stars, stars that humanity would never see again. Helm said, "Activate the intergalactic drive." The spirit of tomorrow hummed with power. Throughout the fleet, 300 ships followed suit. The greatest migration in human history was about to begin. All ships report ready, Admiral. Looked out at the galaxy one last time. He thought about all the years of struggle, all the humiliation, all the dreams that had been crushed by the Conquered's endless rules. He thought about his, who would grow up in a new galaxy, free from the prejudice of the old one. "Take us home," he said quietly. The fleet surged forward. In the Milky Way, sensors across 1,000 worlds detected the departure. Species that had been watching in hope or despair saw the human fleet accelerate beyond anything their technology could match. Within hours, the fleet would reach speeds that would take them outside the galaxy. Within years, they would arrive in Andromeda. And the species left behind would be alone. On Earth, the last remaining humans watched the sky as their brothers and sisters departed. Some had chosen to stay, too old or too attached to leave. They knew they would not survive long without the support of the greater human civilization. They knew they were sacrificing themselves. But they wanted to watch. They wanted to see humanity's final triumph over the species that had held them back for so long. In the great chamber of the Galactic Conquered sat alone. The other delegates had gone, scattering to deal with the crisis. Only the High Speaker remained, watching the sensors track the human fleet as it disappeared into the void. He thought about all the decisions that had led to this moment. The votes against human expansion, the rejection of their technology, the refusal to believe their warnings. Each decision had seemed logical at the time. Each decision had been a step toward disaster. And now the disaster had arrived. The galaxy would survive, he told himself. Other species would learn to do what the humans had done. They would rebuild. They would adapt. But deep in his crystalline heart knew the truth. The humans had been special. Their creativity, their determination, their stubborn refusal to give up. These were things that could not be replaced. The Milky Way would go on, but it would never be the same. On the Spirit of Tomorrow, Admiral Cole stood at the viewport and watched as the galaxy shrank behind them. Soon it would be nothing but a smudge of light, then a distant glow, then just another point in the endless darkness. His daughter stood beside him. "Do you think any of them will survive the?" Considered the question. Some might, they are fighters, they are survivors, they might find a way. But most of them will not. No, agreed, most of them will not. Was quiet for a moment. We could have stayed, we could have helped them prepare despite everything. Nodded slowly. We could have, but sometimes you have to let people face the consequences of their choices. They chose not to listen to us. They chose not to respect us. Now they will learn what that choice cost them. He put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. We have our own future to build. A new galaxy, new worlds, new possibilities. Let the past stay in the past. Ahead of them, Andromeda waited. A spiral of light and promise, 2.5 million light years away. It would take them years to reach it, but they had everything they needed. They had their technology, their knowledge, and their determination. They had each other. And they had something else, something that the Galactic Conquered had never understood. They had hope. Cole smiled as the fleet carried his people toward their new home. Behind them, the Milky Way sent its final desperate transmissions, pleas for help, offers of alliance, promises that things would be different. Did not turn around. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it would live with the consequences. And humanity would finally be free.